Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. What's going on? Coach Luka back here with the Vigor Life Podcast with none other than the protector of the realm of conditioning, the king of the three. And I said,
King of the Morph.
Yeah, the king of the Morph. The king of the Morph. Man, that's fucking hilarious.
Let's not start talking Game of Thrones.
Yeah, let's not go there.
That last episode was not good.
Let's not go there. But we've been on this tip, man. I watched like in 6 weeks, watched 8 years of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But
and it all came to
and we're just disappointed as fuck.
Disappointed.
Yeah. We'll do a whole separate show on this, on the theories going on with that. But I'm so happy to have Joel back. It was actually one of the most, this is a long time ago, but it was one of the most popular podcasts that we did.
It's been a couple years.
Been a couple of years, yeah. And then that one, like I said, like people have been hitting me up to get him back on, and here he is. And we got some I would say powerful questions, man. Listen, because the thing is, since the last time we talked, it's not like, obviously there's more information than there's ever been. But if you look at the industry, I would say there certainly hasn't been enough progress in conditioning energy systems. And that's the one thing I'm going to ask you too is, what people think of what conditioning is. If you go to a person and they say, I'm going to go do cardio.
Yeah. Everyone says that. Right? Everyone does cardio.
Everybody does cardio.
Who doesn't do cardio?
Right. But if you say energy systems or conditioning or they're not usually fitting into that same space. So let's start off with just like the big, because once again, like our goal is to like really educate, not only just, I would say the person that's trying to get in best shape, but coaches.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's still like so many coaches that I would say don't understand enough about, and I'll say it straight up, like don't understand enough about energy system to effectively be able to help their clients recover, lose fat, be conditioned.
Yep. I would just say it's energy in general they don't understand, and
correct.
It comes down to everything is about energy. There's a great quote by a guy named Dr. Herman Ponzer. It's life is a game of turning energy into babies, and really that's what survival and life is about. Everything we're biologically designed to do is survive and pass on our genes to future generations, and that all comes down to just energy in general. So energy system training is really any sort of training. You're always producing lots of energy.
That's the thing too. Like for instance, because I know that people that once you start talking about energy system training, somebody is not thinking, well, strength training is that.
Everything is energy.
But it is.
Everything is training a certain type of energy, because everything that you do requires energy to do it. Whether you're lifting weights, doing some cardio, sleeping, walking around, it doesn't matter. Your body is always producing energy, and the second that it doesn't, you're going to fall over and die. So everything that comes down to energy, that's what it comes down to.
Jon Snow.
No, there's no Lord of Light to take you back. You're probably screwed, let's be honest.
But the thing, with saying that is once again, like people put that shit into boxes. So what is, like, if you could say a parallel, what's the biggest misconception about
I think
conditioning?
The biggest misconception is that they're two different things, or that only an athlete needs conditioning, right? The reality is anyone that's doing cardio or doing any sort of heart rate training, whatever you want to call it, is doing conditioning. They're just not calling it that. So we've traditionally kind of boxed conditioning as, this thing that an athlete does to, get in shape for a competition or for the season or whatever. But the reality is, even if someone's just training for life, that's something to train for, right? You're just trying to look better, feel better, perform better, not die. I mean, that's something that's a goal, right? Not dying is a good goal. So anyone who's training for those things needs cardiovascular development, which is where the word cardio really comes from, right? So I would say the misconception is just that, hey, I don't really need conditioning, I'm not an athlete. Well, you need cardiovascular development because you're a human being. So yes, you do. You're just not calling it conditioning, but what you're doing is preparing you for something. Now, it's different.
I've heard you say this before, and some people will get like really up in their shit, like, no, strength is the most important factor. And obviously, like, strength is very important, but you've said before, and maybe that was a little bit of punch in the face to kind of bring it up, but that cardio is more important than strength.
I think if we're looking at the big picture of life in general, you need both. I mean, there's research out there that shows, older populations that have strength basically live longer. But the reality is, probably the reason they live longer is because they can get up and move around and they can be active. If you don't have the strength to stand up, you're probably not doing a whole lot of work. So there was a paper that came out, this big review. It looked at lots of different papers of different types of athletes and different types of things like that, and then looked at life expectancy. And they looked at powerlifters, team sport athletes, a variety of different types of sports and athletes. And the only athletes that they found that lived substantially longer than the average person were aerobic endurance athletes who lived up to like 7 or 8 years, if I remember right, longer than the average person. That's a big difference, right?
10% plus. Yeah.
Being generally active will increase your life expectancy by a couple of years compared to being sedentary, which actually isn't that much if you think about it. But if you're talking 7 or 8 years, you're talking 10% increase in life expectancy. That's a massive number. And the reality is, it's because the aerobic system and this sort of work helps your body prepare for the stress of life, because it is what drives recovery. Everything that your body has to go through has some level of stress on it that it then has to recover from, whether it's mental stress, physical stress, combinations of both. The aerobic system drives recovery, and the aerobic system turns off the inflammation that's produced for all these things. So if you don't have a decent level of aerobic fitness, which is what most of us would think about in terms of general conditioning, you're setting yourself up for long-term problems. And if you consider this ridiculous fact that 1 out of every 3 people in the U.S., at least roughly, dies from cardiovascular-related disease, there's not a whole lot of research showing that strength training by itself is going to prevent cardiovascular disease. It's it contribute. It's certainly beneficial in some means, but we know from decades of research that cardiovascular training prevents cardiovascular disease. So, if we're talking about 1 out of every 3 people dying from cardiovascular disease, and 80% roughly of those things are preventable, and cardiovascular training, which we would consider conditioning, is the best thing that we've seen to prevent that and treat that. It's a pretty clear thing that conditioning and all the whatever you want to title it is, the most important if your goal is to stay alive.
But I think you brought up something important though, because if you look at life in general, okay, so work, stress, kids, training, that the higher level of aerobic fitness that you have basically like fights against that essentially, right? Because otherwise the stressor is bigger. If you can't recover well, you don't have the capacity to recover well, then everything becomes more of a stressor.
Yeah, there's a good paper that I was looking at not too long ago where they'll have people do like a really mentally demanding task. Like they'll sit there and have them solve some math puzzle or some something that's basically mentally challenging, and then they measure the rise of what are called cytokines, which can be both pro or anti-inflammatory. But particularly look at some ones that are pro-inflammatory, and you see that like this elevation in inflammation for up to like 4 or 5, sometimes even 6 hours after you've like gone through this mentally demanding thing. So it's what people, I would say that's the biggest misconception that people have is, mental stress is inflammatory. It's demanding. It's something that puts a lot of damage and wear and tear in the body over many years. It's up to the aerobic system essentially to help your body cope with that stress, because it's anti-inflammatory. This
is what's perfect for you, because and even in your presentation at the Vigor Summit and some of the stuff that you talked about is about why people don't obviously like build muscle or burn fat, or because first of all the last place that the brain is gonna I would say allocate energy is towards things like building muscle, because it's not as important as survival.
It's actually in many ways detrimental to survival. I said, if you were when's the last time you saw like a 400-pound jacked out of his mind lion out in the wild? Yeah, probably not that often, because if there's a famine or food supply is short, they're screwed. They have way too much muscle mass. They have all this energy, and their body is not well equipped to survive that. Fat. Think about this: a pound of fat has 9 calories, right, per gram of fat. Protein has 4. So if you're talking about long-term energy storage of surviving famines, you actually want more fat and less muscle, because muscle requires less energy, or more energy, to upkeep, and it produces less energy in case of a famine if you have to burn it. So we're not biologically hardwired to be jacked and tan. It's just not the case.
And so, but so that point though, when it comes to stress, because we're more stressed than ever, right?
Oh, yeah,
so now you think like we're less conditioned than ever and more stressed than ever, and then you got 2 whammies.
Well, I think you got 3 whammies, right? Less conditioned, more stress, more nutrient dense, more calorically dense foods for cheaper prices. So you have a bunch of people stressed out of their mind from work, eating more calories every single day with lower levels of aerobic fitness and conditioning in general. So that's why you have 1 out of 3 people in the country die from cardiovascular disease. It's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. But I think that's a good point, is because when somebody thinks about I'm stressed out, like things like strategies to reduce stress, which meditation and walking in nature. Obviously, sleep is. We talk about sleep, how important sleep is, but But nobody goes like, well, let me go do more cardio or a specific type of cardio to battle this and to have a better foundation to not be as stressed.
Or if they do, they go in and just crush themselves. Which is contributing to the problem.
Contributing to the problem.
There's a trade-off. You have to develop fitness, which means you have to train and put yourself in stress, but then you have to actually give your chance of body to recover and repair it and improve itself. And that's the other thing that people make the mistake of, is the body's energy supply is limited. It can't produce an ending amount of energy every day. It's like your job. You can only work so many hours in a day. Even if you work 24 hours a day, that's it. You've topped out your salary if you're getting paid on an hourly basis. So our body has a certain amount of energy it can produce, and once you go above that threshold, it's not producing more energy. It's just redirecting it from one source to to another. So, if you're mentally stressed out, which takes energy, if you're running around dealing with life, and then you go to the gym and you crush yourself, like you've put it out so much energy that you might not have enough to actually use any leftover to repair yourself and to build yourself back up and see those changes in fitness. So that's where I like to differentiate between overtraining and under recovering, because they're not always the same. You don't necessarily have to do massive volumes of training to still be what I would consider under recovered, meaning you're not getting the full benefit of that training because you're not allowing your body to fully recover and adapt to it, in which case you're just putting lots of wear and tear in your body for nothing because you're putting stress on the joints and the tissues, but you're not repairing those those micro tears and damages and making your fitness better. So over time, when you do that, you're ultimately just putting wear and tear without the benefit of it.
So with that said, because I think that right now we kind of live in this, you're either going super hard or you're not going at all. So think about the implementation. Okay, actually let's go to this first. Sure. Let's talk about not just CrossFit for sure, because I want to rile some people up. But also honestly, just the rise of I would say high intensity group training. So whether it's the Orange Theories, the Burn Boot Camps, you name it, right? How is that? First of all, when you do look at the science of, I would say, energy system training, and an average person goes like, hey, you know what? I want to get in shape. I haven't been doing much, but let me go to, any of these places and train 4 to 5 days a week, for 45 to 60 minutes and obviously go hard in the paint, because that's what happens. First of all, what does that do to the body? Because that was the question. Can you train high intensity 5 days a week at that level, 45 to 60 minutes for an average person?
No.
And get.
Let's put it this way. If you're a professional athlete who has phenomenal genetics, you have all the hours in the day to rest and relax, you're not training, you don't have a ton of mental stress, you have your nutrition completely dialed in, you're sleeping well, then maybe you can get away with that sort of stuff. But 99.9% of the population does not fall into that category. That's just the reality of it. They don't have the genetics of a world-class athlete. They're stressed out, working 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Their nutrition probably could use some improvement here and there. They're sleeping probably less than what they need to sleep. So no, they're ultimately not going to be able to take advantage of all that training, because they're not going to have the energy left over to actually recover from it. So again, it's how much training can you do that you can still recover and adapt from. Yeah. Anything more than that, you're just taking away energy from recovery and you're putting more stress on your body for nothing.
And that's why, you are obviously, somebody starting is going to see some results. You're going to have adaptations, but that's why you see people hit that wall. And so what are
let's talk about that for 1 sec. So everyone loves to cite the damn Tabata study, right? Yeah. Everybody loves the Tabata. Yeah. Tabata study has been used to justify high intensity training more than just about any damn study on the face of the earth. Definitely more study than any other study. There were 7 people in the Tabata group, and there were 7 people in the non-Tabata group, for God's sakes. We're talking about 14 people. Okay, the other thing is, the Tabata high-intensity group, they saw changes in their VO2 max for 3 weeks. They saw this improvement, and then it plateaued. The lower
so that doesn't get talked about first.
No, it doesn't get talked about. It was only half the program, their VO2 max improved, and the other half it didn't. So the second 3 weeks, no change in VO2 max. The other group that did less, didn't do the high intensity training, saw continuous improvement over those 6 weeks. So they were seeing constant improvement throughout the 6 weeks versus the Tabata group who wasn't. So it just basically, it summarizes high intensity produces big results for a very short period of time, and then you plateau. And there's only so much you can keep increasing intensity before you're going to fall apart. So we just have to realize that, yes, if we're looking at a very short window, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, higher intensity is always going to get better results in that short window. But if we're talking about 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 months,
life.
Yeah, you have to have a much more balanced approach to it. You can go in and crush yourself for 3 weeks, but you can't go out and crush yourself for 3 months or 3 years without paying the consequences. That's what it comes down to.
And I mean, the thing is, it's kind of like one of those like duh questions, but what does overtraining show up as? How do you know? How does a person that's listening to this, that's not a coach, maybe, actually I would even say for coaches just as much, but a person that started doing some high intensity training, they're going to group oriented class, they're going hard in the paint 4 or 5 days a week.
Actually, let's talk about this. How do you know if you're under recovered? If you're training your ass off and nothing's getting better, right? So if I'm going to the gym 4 or 5 days a week and I'm not constantly seeing improvements, obviously I'm putting the work in. If I'm not seeing the results, it's because I'm not recovering well enough to see my body actually adapt to it, which I would say is equally or even more common than what we'd call overtraining. I mean, when I look at overtraining, you're talking about causing so much volume and intensity that your body starts to break down. You feel less motivated. You see changes in hormone levels. Your power output decreases. Your heart rates can't get elevated as high usually. You see all these physiological symptoms of too much training. But I would say what's just as common or more is doing more than your body can actually adapt to. So, like I said, the biggest thing is, hey, if I'm going to the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week and I'm training hard and I'm just not really getting better, what the hell are you doing? You
said something that I do want to bring up, because most people think that when they're under recovered, their heart rate is going to be super high.
No, often it'll be lower.
But it'll be lower.
In the long run, it depends kind of how far you push it.
How far you push it. Short term, it'll be higher, but then long term.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you're going to see this decreased responsiveness to all these stress hormones, like adrenaline and noradrenaline. Like if you just flood your body with these hormones all the damn time, then your body basically desensitizes itself and then ultimately produces less in general. So you'll see your heart rates won't elevate once you kind of get past a certain point. But again, you should be going to the gym and training to see progress. Otherwise, what the hell's the point, right? So if you're not seeing, hey, my heart rate recovery is getting better, or I'm losing body fat, if that's my goal, or my strength isn't improving, if that's my goal. If you're not seeing the changes, even though you're doing the work, there's a reason for that. Chances are you're probably already trained hard enough if you're going in the gym every day and doing that. I mean, most people, I would say, are putting work in these days because everyone's bought into the idea, but how many of them are actually seeing a continued constant improvement? Even if they're not 20% a week, there should be some progress in what you're doing, and if you don't see that progress, there's a reason for that. So, and tracking, I mean, I think tracking obviously is very important. It's easier to think about tracking weight, tracking body fat percentage. That's, I think, a little easier concept to see, but I think this is the thing that we talked about years ago, and is still like not happening, obviously, let alone in a wider scale. But it's like tracking recovery, tracking your conditioning, and seeing heart rate monitors and HRV, and that's like, so what would, put it this way, I'm actually going to skip ahead and we'll come back, but like ideally, right, if this is ideal and you're like, hey, in an ideal world, group training, what does it look like to make it better? Or maybe even like, okay, what's not maybe completely optimal, but what would be better than what it is right now? Yeah, I think what I mean? Better is setting the goal of constant improvement rather than just setting the goal of how many calories can you burn, which is really like literally what most heart rate type training group fitness classes are like. I want to burn as many calories as I possibly can. Like that's not the right goal, right? The goal should be, I'm going to train myself at the the intensity and volume necessary to get better. So I think the easiest way to describe that is personalization, right? You've got to be able to group people into different fitness levels, and they should have different intensities. Someone who's a beginner does not need the same intensity that somebody who is, a high-level athlete with a high level of fitness to start with. So just figuring out how do we build group training sessions and classes in general that are more personalized than just everyone doing the same damn thing. And then also, like I said, you shouldn't have 5 maximum intensity group training sessions a week. Like you're ultimately going to pay the price for that. So there should be some group class options, I think, for people that they can go to that aren't designed to push your body to its maximum capacities, but that are designed to foster and facilitate recovery. So I think you need to have classes that are not just all high intensity, kill yourself, but maybe you have a couple classes a week that are recovery driven classes, or maybe you have some more moderate classes. I think people just need to get away from this like one class size fits all approach and start offering classes that aren't just about running into the ground, but are also about facilitating recovery as well. And so that was something that you're working on, obviously, that I certainly am going to be a part of, but like a couple of things that we do that I want to bring to the forefront of how you can do this. Number one,
whether it's the same class, but people know their heart rates.
Yeah, exactly. Personalized. That's what I'm saying. Personalization.
Within
right?
a larger group, still having personalized and knowing which zones they should be in.
Yep.
Number two is, we now have 2. We're going on to 3 mobility sessions, which you're still going to get an elevated heart rate, but nowhere more than 120 to 140. As well as where we'll tell people, come in, like, here's your program that's aerobic power based, or high intensity continuous training, something that's going to elicit recovery, and they understand that.
Yep.
And they can go like, you know what, I'm smoked. Okay, cool. Well, this is what you got going on. And I think that's the future. And certainly I think the tools and, some of the stuff that you're working on is really, really exciting, is the tools to bring to the forefront to be able to have gym owners do that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest problem is it's hard to do, right? If you know everybody using heart rate monitors and you just kind of say, oh, the goal is to crush yourself, then that's easy to do.
Yeah.
But what's more difficult is, okay, I'm going to give each person the right amount of volume and intensity for them to see the improvements and reach their goals. So, that takes a more concerted effort. That takes using heart rate training. That takes using some technology. And it takes the right mindset of, hey, we're going to do things differently than everybody else, which is something I want to stress. If you're just running a high intensity, kick your ass in the ground class, join the damn club. Like that's everywhere.
Yeah.
How are you going to separate yourself as a gym owner or a business owner or coach or whatever from everybody else doing the same shit? I mean, you're just another high intensity class and you're competing with 15 of them around the block. Like that's a waste of time. Number one, because it's not as effective, but number two, because again, I'm now just another person doing the same thing that everybody else in the industry is doing, that every other class is run like. So, I think if your goal is, hey, I want to get people better results, I want to get people results for the long term, and I want to separate myself and build my coaching business by being better, then you have to take, a different approach. You have to do things differently. And
it starts by, one, like knowing what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
just like, which, and at the end we'll mention it, but obviously, I've always been the biggest proponent of, Joel cert, the Bioforce conditioning cert, which is absolute best. But the thing is, once you go through that, it's kind of almost like, holy shit, like, what am I doing? And to give an example of just like, think about this, right? And look, we still have some of this going on. Like what I would say is that we've done well and continue to do well is like educating people on where they should be and what they should do. But if you have, which everybody does, you've got a lot of different populations. Susie Sue comes in, she hasn't trained in 5 years, done very little things, and then we have a 30 on, 30 off. And then you have a high-level athlete or I don't know, a college athlete that's pretty damn conditioned. Sure. 30 seconds of high intensity for, Susie, how much can she even exert, number one, but that's going to get her like tired, right? The other person is going to be able to exert more, is going to make them tired, but like if their heart rate would come below 130 beats per minute in very different time frames, right?
Completely different.
The athlete might be able to be down in 30 seconds, maybe.
Yeah, and plus the athlete's got a specific goal, specific energy systems. Like, even taking 2 athletes, college athletes, one's playing soccer, one's playing football, or another one's a rower, like they're not going to need the same interval training program. Yep. They're doing completely different things. Their body has to be developed to produce the energy that they need for their sport versus Susie, who just wants to, again, not die and probably walk around until she does die so she can, interact with her family and her kids and not just be an invalid as she gets older. So those are entirely separate goals. So to think they should be on the exact same program or doing the same intervals and the same conditioning, it just doesn't make any damn sense.
The thing that like I want to bring up is though that whereas maybe somebody that's more trained and conditioned and stuff might be able to regulate this better, maybe, because let's be real, like most athletes don't do that well either.
Yep.
But for a person that's coming in and going like, hey, look, I want to have the best results ever, and then 3 months in finds himself like starting to get, because what happens when you're under recovered is like now you get soft tissue injuries, right? Because you're reaching threshold, you're having you're lethargic, motivation goes down, like stress goes up, you're having a tough time sleeping.
So it's actually funny, there was going back to the Tabata stuff because I love to harp on that. There was a longer term paper, I think it was 12 weeks, and they essentially had this really high intensity group, they had this moderate intensity group, and they had this lower intensity group. And they measured 2 things that were really interesting. Number one, they kind of measured these markers of improvement across the 3 months. Now, interesting enough, the markers across 3 months are almost identical between super high intensity group, kind of moderate, and the lower intensity. Their overall change in fitness levels was very similar between the 3 groups. But what was more interesting is they actually had everybody rate their exercise enjoyment. Basically, like, how much do you like doing this or not like doing this? Which group do you think rated the lowest for exercise enjoyment?
Highest intensity.
Highest intensity group by far said, this sucks. And they didn't ultimately, over those 12 weeks, see any greater changes in the other groups. So do the math. Like if I'm trying to run a business and my people say, this sucks, I don't like it, and they're not getting any better results than somebody who's working much, not killing themselves every day and says they enjoy their program more, who's going to stick around longer? Who's going to stick around longer? Who's going to stay in your gym versus who's not? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
You know what's crazy is that like because in nutrition, this is starting to kind of grab a hold a little bit, right? Like sustainability.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That if you go on a diet and it's extreme, you're gonna not want to stick to the diet. So hey, eat the foods that you like.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's a binge training. Right?
Yeah, it's
like,
exactly.
It just doesn't work.
And it's the same thing in fitness. That's actually pretty fascinating. But because right now there is this mentality of, and look, hard work is important, but crushing yourself into the ground over a nonstop period of time is actually going to take you backwards rather than forwards.
Yeah, exactly. Not only that, even if it was effective, if again, the same thing. If I had this perfect diet that I could guarantee you would cause you to lose all this fat and build all this muscle, but you hated it, like how many people are really going to do it for the long run?
Very few.
Very few.
And the other problem too is your association with it becomes shitty, right? Because the person that went, hey, I did this high intensity thing for 5 months. I lost weight. Then I stalled. I got hurt. Fucking hated doing it. Like wasn't enjoying.
Exactly.
Now you go like, hey, you should start training again. They associate training with super high intensity and crushing yourself. And now they don't want to do it. Just like food, right? Like going on a diet. Fuck, I don't want to do that. Because they think it's one thing, right? It's really, really strict.
Yeah, and that's the problem too. Is I think a lot of coaches and trainers, they're in the fitness industry. It's what they've been doing their entire damn lives, and their view of like the sacrifices and the hard work in terms of diet and all the other variables, like that's what they do, right? I mean, that's why you're in fitness, because you're into those sort of things. Your average person is walking in the gym. It's not. That's why they're not a damn trainer. They work at Microsoft, they do something else. They don't view training and nutrition and all these things with the same passion and zeal that you do. Otherwise, that might be in the fitness industry too. So you can't make all these assumptions about like what works for you, which is what a lot of coaches do. Like, oh, this works really well for me. Yeah. This is the training that I do. This is the diet I follow. Well, great. You run a damn gym. Like, this is your life. For most people, it's not. So what's sustainable for you very well is probably not sustainable for the average person walking your doors. That's just the reality of it.
And so, I think we continue to, as an industry, I think still too much try to bring other people into our world rather than going into theirs.
Absolutely.
And going like, hey man, what could this person do with like 3-4 moderate training sessions a week, or maybe some are higher, some are lower, but I'm actually leveling them out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even just like with athletes, combat sports was on a big, increase for a long period of time. And you had all these combat athletes looking for strength coaches, and then you had these strength coaches who trained football athletes their entire career, all of a sudden writing these strength conditioning program for combat athletes. And you make the mistake of thinking that like, hey, well, they're a high level athlete, they should be able to follow the same program as an off-season football player. I tried that shit until I went over and started actually doing all the combat work myself. I'm like, this is destroying me. There's no way.
Yeah, there's no way you can do that. This is the right
program. So you learn quickly, like, you always have to go to what the other person's life and demands are, rather than like thinking that they exist in some vacuum where you can do all this here and they're just outside your gym doing all this stuff that doesn't matter. Hell yeah, it matters. Everything they're doing matters. So I think you just have to realize the demands of working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and having a family life and a social life. That shit can't be forgotten.
And the thing is weird because you do have to have obviously getting into training and doing strength training, doing these things, there's some discipline involved. There's some obviously, habits that you got to change and things like that. But I think it just gets pushed. The pendulum gets, kind of pushed that way. And I think a lot of the marketing and everything else is kind of like, man, like you got to go hard no matter what. This, that, and the other. Gain, right? And it's interesting because like I'm certainly like when it comes to my own training in a bubble, what's funny is that I cut it down, and like in the last 2 months, and like my results went up, right? Because you enjoy it, right? Like it's
you want to do it.
You enjoy it, but then once again, it's like how do you replace? But for me, like a big part of it was too. Even though I understood it, I was like, man, as long as I do stuff, so like I do a lot more aerobic power work, I do a lot more like recovery type training, and I feel like I'm doing stuff, right? Which is important for people that have to want to feel like they're doing stuff.
Exactly.
But it's actually giving me benefit and progress and results versus. Like fuck, like I'm.
Well, if you've always had this mindset, which again a lot of coaches are going to have, is the more I work, the more I gain, or the harder I work, the more I gain. Then you're always like, oh, I'm not working hard enough. I'm not going to get results. I'm not.
It actually drives it because a person that thinks that way. I remember I had like overtraining syndrome when I was super young, 17, because I was a nutcase, just training all the time.
Well, I mean, we all know that. when you're 17, you mean, come on, you're still a nutcase.
it was pretty crazy, but it was like one of the coaches, he said that was a huge problem with the triathletes he was training, because when they would get tired, they would think they need to train more.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing in combat sports. It's the same damn way, right?
Similar, yeah.
I mean, tactical athletes, a lot of them the same way. I mean,
bury themselves.
It's just the mindset of like thinking that if you're not crushing yourself, that you're not seeing the results. You're going to see the results. It's a mindset issue more than anything else. I get that question a lot actually. It's, how do I get my athletes to do X, Y, and Z? Well, get a few of them that trust you to buy into it, show them results, and then the rest becomes easy, because that's what it comes down to. If you actually start to see results, like, holy shit, I actually am getting better without doing as much, then you want to keep doing it. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
You know what? I as you were saying that, that story came to my mind, the swimming, the Chinese judo team, or you just throw them in a pool.
Yeah, you just throw them in a pool, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's you see that in a lot of other countries. I mean, I think China's a good example. I've been over there several times. I'm about to go back over there, and that is their entire mindset is literally like, how many hours a day are there? Well, can we figure out how to put more hours a day so we could train people more than that? I mean, that's literally kind of their philosophy, and you see the results. Like, it pays off with some gold medals, but the number of athletes that are just destroyed that might have actually been high level athletes that they had a different approach is mind-boggling, and it's a price that they're willing to pay. I mean, they're willing to break 1,000 athletes to get to one. But what happens if you're one of those 1,000 athletes, right? Your life sucks. Like, you got destroyed in the program that didn't have to happen that way. So, we live in a society where we don't really want to kill 100 people to find one good one. Like, we want everyone to succeed and achieve their goals and benefit from fitness.
You are seeing that in specialization in sports, though, with kids too.
Crazy.
Right
it's
now.
gotten crazy. Youth athletes are it's nuts.
And like, man, I won't even bring up the who, but like the example of actually just in the last couple of weeks, the two people that I talked to, they're like, as I'm having a conversation, whether it's with the parent, or I'm like, holy shit, like, this is insane. 12 years old, 14 years old.
Yeah,
and I'm like, the hours are.
Dude, it's club sports, and then it's high school sports, and then it's like playing on some other club team when your club team's not playing. Like soccer, volleyball, basketball. I mean, all of those sports they're not just year round. They're just like nonstop.
Nonstop. And I actually glad I brought this up, because for anybody who's listening to this, and if you're a parent, like, this is like the. But first of all, every sport has a pattern that's specific to it. Yeah. I mean, let's take baseball, because it's so, obviously if you're pitching or hitting, I mean, it's like one-sided, one arm that has the fastest movement in sports, and you're doing it all year round. And then when it's off season, you go and you do camps and you do showcases and you do that, and like literally all year round, you are putting your arm through like just the most insane amount of volume. Like, you will get crushed, guaranteed. This is guaranteed. It's basketball, same thing. Right now, I talk to teams, and it's like, oh, well, they got this then. I'm like, well, when do you train to actually get better?
Yeah,
it's like, well, we train, we just go and play. And it's like, no, that's fucking not training.
Well, another interesting point is, everyone talked about the 10,000 hour rule that was made popular. This idea that you just, like, expertise comes from just massive repetitions. Now, obviously, you need lots of repetitions to develop true expertise. I'm not saying otherwise. But there was a review paper where they looked at like all sorts of different sports and even disciplines like business management and just all these different areas. And they found the number of hours of deliberate practice only accounted for about 20 to 22% of the difference in performance, right? So just the number of sheer hours of practice is not the single thing that separates someone who's a really high level person from someone who's shitty. It only accounts for 22% of what described the difference between the highest level from the lower level people.
What did it bring up? What were the most important factors?
Lots of different stuff. Yeah. I mean, some of it's genetics, right? I mean, some of it's what you were born to do and your body type, and some of it's just your innate skill levels, and some of it's the type of practice you did, obviously. So there's just something to be said for it's not just sheer volume of like, let me just cram in as many reps as I can as a youth athlete, and that's magically going to get me to the path. I mean, you've got to actually train deliberately, but also intelligently, and you've also got to have the damn genetics for it, and you've got to have other variables tuned in as well. But it's the idea that just 10,000 hours is going to make you an expert is nonsense. It doesn't.
I would even say that probably that the grease the groove mentality and just about everything works better, right? Where it's like, how can I do the best and stay as fresh as I can?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I would say that frequency and staying as fresh as you can and do it in excellence will be faster than doing it more often and just fucking crushing it.
That actually, I mean, I think that's an argument you can make about the high intensity thing. Like, you know how you train and see improvements? Like stay healthy and you train your ass off and you do just all this high intensity work. And now my shoulder starts hurting, and then my low back starts bothering me a little bit. And then on my knees kind of now I can't train at 100%. So my training is shitty for weeks on end. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I'd actually just managed my training and stress appropriately, I could have stayed healthy enough to train those 4 or 8 weeks at 100% versus 60% or 80% or 70%. So consistency in the long run will always pay off in terms of performance or fitness or whatever. And again, if you sacrifice that by just killing yourself, and you pay the price in terms of consistency, you'll be better off in the long run. Be more moderate. Now,
to get people to like see, I mean, awareness precedes change, right? But like wearables, because I want to touch about wearables. Yep. And obviously, like Morpheus is, I just got mine, which I'm excited about. But tracking, obviously, your recovery, your heart rate, your like everything, right?
Yep.
At what point in time? Because first of all, like it does give you, I mean, anything that's, whether it's me tracking my sleep and going, holy shit, like didn't sleep good tonight. What happened? Right? Creates awareness around it. And that in itself is massively powerful.
Sure.
Same thing with heart rate monitoring. Like, whoa, like I didn't know I get here so fast. Maybe I need to recover. Where does it, I'd say our friend Andy Galpin co-wrote a book called Unplugged where it talked, and it didn't, I wouldn't say it didn't shit on wearables, but it just brung to the forefront that like maybe some people would put too much into them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's information, right? It's literally just information and feedback for you to make better decisions from. That's it. If you're trying to just rely on it without any sort of common sense or your own concept and ideas being put in there, then yeah, it's not a coach by numbers thing. Like, it's not the human body's not a computer. I mean, we have to understand the information to make better decisions, but you can't just paint by numbers. So again, I've been using the HRV for I don't know almost 20 years now, and really what it's allowed me to do is again it's just make better decisions about what's appropriate on a given day, and then also is am I really improving in things? Because HRV, whole discussion is a great marker of just general conditioning, aerobic fitness. Am I going to go down and do lab testing and check my threshold, my VO2 max? Am I going to test that all the time? No, it's a pain in the ass. It's expensive, and I'm probably not going to do it. But HRV, if I can look at the trend, it's going to tell me like, is that changing? Yes or no? Is my fitness getting better by looking at HRV? Yes or no? So I think we just use it as a tool to gather information, make better decisions. And I think we also use it as a tool to see like, am I actually improving? Mm-hmm. And then particularly we look at like Morpheus or other tools that give you recovery. Then it's a lot of times it's a guide of, am I pushing too hard or am I not? And a lot of times people's natural tendencies is to push too hard because like we've talked about the mindsets there. So it can be a tool that just keeps you honest, right? It can help you see like, whoa, maybe this isn't having the effect I thought it was. Maybe I actually am overdoing it. It's a reminder. It's a, again, it's a way to see what's happening internally rather than just externally. And so, yeah, I think if you go overboard, where you're just collecting massive amounts of information and it's not really doing anything for you because you don't know how to interpret all of it, then it's just a waste of time. Or if the data you're collecting is totally inaccurate, it doesn't really mean anything. It's got to be, accurate and actionable and insightful, right? It's got to actually provide value. Otherwise, you don't want to actually waste time and money doing it.
So one of the things that I noticed with clients when we're doing HRV, and as that this proves to the point of that people actually don't know. It's kind of like mindful eating, right? People are like, oh, just do intuitive eating, which I think has a place, but not at the beginning if you're trying to change, because
sure.
What got you here
was intuitive eating, right?
Eating,
exactly.
Right? But it's this. I think it's the same for recovery,
yep.
Right? Where, hey man, like HRV is telling me like I'm pretty fatigued, but I feel okay.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing: I feel okay, but yeah, I've had 4 coffees today. I feel okay, and
yep.
like maybe this is the only thing like I know, right? So. I know for me, even just going through that 30-day paleo IP thing was like, by week 3, I'm like, holy shit, feel so much better. Mm-hmm. But before, if you ask me, do I feel good? I'm like, yeah, I feel great.
Yeah, just
no contrast.
Exactly. Right? It helps you, like I said, it helps keep you honest and it helps actually show you what's going on. You have to kind of face that and deal with it. It's funny, there's some sleep research in it. It basically is like, if you read Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, which I think you did, I know you did, he talked about the fact that everyone says like, oh, no, I can perform well on 6 or 7 hours of sleep. Like, no, you can't. Like, you've just become used to a shitty level of performance that you think is normal. But like, it's the same thing. It's like, well, no, I'm fine. I can train this much and get away with it. You can't though, actually. Like, you're just used to training shitty and being kind of beat up. And that's what data can help show you a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe you're not actually as okay as you thought you were. Or maybe you're actually not as improved.
See, I mean, I think that because we're a hedonic society, like we get used to living like complete shit. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I mean, you could legitimately be. That's why I said, man, I would fucking make these pills, whatever. Like if you're in a ton of pain, take the pill, feel great, but only for 24 hours, and you go back to feeling like shit. So then you're like, oh my God, like I got to do something, right? Same thing with obesity, the same thing with anything else.
Yep.
Is just create contrast, because most people are like, how are you doing? Like, I'm pretty good.
Yep.
You know, but it's like, but they'll be doing this shit all the time. Like, you all right? How's his shoulder? It's, you know,
Well,
it's normal, right?
I mean, here's a symptom you're doing too much, and this is one you're guilty of, is if you fixed it or fixing it. If you were living on stimulants, like if you're living on coffee to get through your day, like there's a reason that you're doing that. And it's not because you're all right. It's because you're having to artificially take something to just get through the damn day. Like if you're in the Starbucks line 4 or 5 times a day and you're just living on coffee or Bang or Zip Fizz or whatever, and that's all you do.
It's not just like I love coffee.
No, no one
that.
likes coffee that much.
I justified this for a long fucking time.
No, it's
Joel, you don't understand. It's the flavor. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get it, man.
No, if you were constantly having to live on caffeine to just get through the day, it's a sign there's something going on that's causing your body to not be able to do it on its own. You have to artificially take those stimulants in to just survive on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And you've built that habit for years because your body's been doing that for years. That's not like my body's performing maximally. That's just like my body's scraping by, and I'm so used to it by now that it feels normal to me. It's just what it is.
I mean, that's a great point, though, because, I mean, I'll like, and, you know, I'm a fitness professional and know my stuff. But I made justification, because we all do, right? It's just like, nah, man, it's all good. Like, I'm fucking healthy. I did it. But then there's stuff that, like, we're just so used to that it is.
Yep.
Actually, you know, with that said, though, because we talked about the book a lot, just the studies, like why we sleep, you know, how important, like, because it's literally kind of almost at the top of the food chain.
It is.
It really is. You know, if you don't sleep.
It's the pillar. It's the biggest foundation of everything.
If your sleep is not, and you got, you know, check your sleep, and now there's apps and there's all types of different things that you can do and see what it's like. I mean, for me, it's actually drove me, because I have a deviated septum, to go like, man, I got to get this surgery because it's going to be so much better for my sleeping and everything, right? Because you're just fighting against, I mean, you don't get enough sleep, guess what? You're not getting enough recovery.
No, and people's idea of enough sleep, I think, is skewed too. I mean, the reality is,
I mean, eight is minimum.
For somebody who's training hard, and that's, but they'll even think of like, okay, I was in bed for 8 hours, therefore I got 8 hours. No, you didn't. I mean, you didn't sleep you didn't sleep the second your head hit the pillow till the second you woke up. No, you weren't sleeping 8 hours. If you were in bed 8 hours, you're probably sleeping 7.5, maybe less. And a lot of the research is like, you know, your average person. Well, if you're going to the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week, like you're not the average person. You know, I would say the average athlete / somebody who trains hard in the gym, you know, 8.5 to 9 hours of actual sleep is going to be what they're going to need. And there is no bullshit like, oh, I don't need that much. Yeah, you do actually, if you want to perform at a high level. I mean, can you survive on less? Yeah. But are you going to thrive on less? No.
And there was a very small percentage of people that could do less.
They talked about the research. It's like half of a percent. I mean, it's
very, very small.
Very small.
So, I mean, that was, you know, that's another punch in the face. And, you know, if you're sleeping 4, maybe you can't get to 8 by next year, but man, if you got to 6, your life would change. I mean,
I think if you don't fix sleep, you're screwed.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're
always limited. You're always limiting everything, from memory to motor control to fitness gains to longevity. I mean,
you're a shittier person.
Literally everything. Yeah, you're a shittier version of yourself. Because guess what?
Like you get up and you're tired. The first thing that happens, you're like, fuck this.
Yeah.
Everybody's a dick, right? But I mean, seriously, it's like fixing your sleep can fix a lot of stuff in your life. Now, to bring it kind of all back together, man, because this is, you know, what we're talking about right now. I think sometimes for coaches it can get overwhelming, even though it doesn't have to be like from a standpoint like, okay, man, how do I like put all this stuff together? Like my clients have to be strength training. You know, if I got athletes, like they need power, they need strength, they need to do, you know, conditioning for their sport. You know, bring it and need recovery, like bringing it all together, because I mean, obviously that's what I would say what the certification helps do, and that's what's been so useful. Where for people that I know that I've recommended and they came back and they're like, man, like now shit is clear to me, right? Because it's like, where did I put all this stuff? And of course, some of it is about also educating the client and being good at explaining it in a very simple way.
That's exactly what you have to do. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you can't. People always ask about buy-in. Well, buy-in is about belief, right? It's getting them to believe in your system, which you have to be able to explain your system to them in the first place, or your thought process and reason. If you can't tell somebody in words they can understand why they need to do something, they're definitely not going to. They're not even going to try to do it. It doesn't make any damn sense to them. So you've got to be able to like put your system and your philosophy into words, and then B, make sure that those words are understood by the people you're communicating with. And as I would say, as coaches and trainers, a lot of us tend to try to overcomplicate the shit out of things and try to make ourselves sound smart by really using lots of big words. But that's fine if you're talking to another coach who knows what you're talking about. It's not so fine if you're talking to somebody you're training, because they're not going to have a damn clue what you're talking about. Even if it's right, they're not going to have a clue.
But the thing is, education. See, this is the thing that, because we kind of talked about this, like people saying like, it needs to be more. I'm like, yo, first of all, how you have to be able to break it down. I think even as to a coach and as a coach, so the coach can explain it to the marketplace. Because who are we doing it for, right?
Yeah,
Think
exactly.
about this, right? Like, the coach's goal and mission is to help the client transform.
Should be.
Yeah, it should. Correct. It should be, right? It should be. So why am I learning something in a way where I cannot then communicate this in a message or a story or whatever to where that person understands it? That's the goal.
It is the goal.
The goal is not to be like, listen, I know, like, let me, kind of like break down all this stuff. And you got a person that's like, I don't fucking know what you're talking about.
Yep.
And how does this relate to my goal and what matters to me and, the meaning in my life? Like, man, if you can't do that, you've lost. And so I feel like, how do you, the education in fitness, how do you take high level stuff, break it down and explain it in a way where this can get communicated and spread like wildfire, so it becomes the new norm. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's what you've done very, very well. So with that said, let me see. Hold on, man. Let's see if there's something else I haven't grilled you on. Oh shit! Like that. This is important. All right, this is important because I get this a bunch. So you'll hear this. A lot of times, somebody will say like, "Well, I'm just trying to put on muscle. Who gives a fuck about fit? Like actually actually do the least amount of cardio possible."
Sure.
Where does that play in?
Well,
and also, how does it play in for somebody that wants to get leaner and maintain muscle? Because of course, most people will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing a lot of cardio because I'm trying to lose weight," right? But talk a little bit about those two because they get brought up pretty often.
Okay. So let's say someone says, "Oh, I want to put a bunch of muscle mass." And what's the best way to do that? Well, eat a shit ton of protein and take a lot of drugs and don't move other than that. Like, that's the honest to God truth. I mean, that's what bodybuilders flat out are doing. They're on shit tons of drugs. They're taking massive amounts of food and they're really not moving a whole lot. So most of their energy is being devoted towards building muscle. Now, will you build a lot of muscle? Yeah,
sure.
You probably will. But will you die at a younger age? Will you feel like shit afterwards? Yeah, you probably will. I mean, I hate to bring this up, but go watch a documentary on Ronnie Coleman and decide, is that the life that I want to end up living? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's obviously way far in the extreme, but still, you have to make trade-offs in life, right? Everything has a trade-off. I mean, there's a pluses and minuses. If I want to put all my eggs in the basket of like, hey, I want to build as much muscle as possible, then yeah, you're probably not going to do a whole lot of cardio, but you're going to pay the price for that in terms of your overall health and in terms of your longevity, in terms of your risk of different things down the road. So if that's your only goal in life and you don't care if you fall apart in your 50s and have a damn heart attack, go for it.
But that's
right?
why I think it's so much.
That's the price you got to realize. Nothing's for free. Nothing is for free. You can't say my goal is to build as much muscle as possible and I'm willing to sacrifice that unless you realize like, yeah, you actually are sacrificing your health in the process. Most people aren't really looking to do that. They might say that, but that's not really what they're looking to do. They're just trying to build muscle, in which case, like, yeah, let's say you sacrificed, I don't know, a half pound of muscle because you did some cardiovascular work that kept you healthy and kept you moving and kept you feeling good. Most people would say that's worth it because you're not even going to see a half pound of muscle, for God's sakes. So most people, that are training, they're not willing to make that sacrifice. They might think like, oh, I really want to build muscle. But the reality is no, they want to feel good. They want to look good. But they also want to be able to move. They want to be healthy. They want all those things too. They don't really just want the far extreme of that. They might say that, but they don't. I mean, they want to have a combination.
I mean, I feel like everybody wants to be a certain level of fit, which is, to me always an interesting thing, right? Because if you say I want to be fit, I say I want to be fit. Somebody that's a hobby in jits, like listen, I want to be able to roll for 2-3 hours. I'm like, hey, I want to be able to go hike for 8 and play basketball for 2.5 and still look jacked, right?
Yep, exactly.
Everybody's got what fit means to them. But I think that this is where it because you can't be fit without conditioning. First of all, it's not possible. No. You know what I mean? So but that's why understanding it is so important to where it's not just like, okay, cool. Well, look, I'm going to go and do some super high level sprints for 60 seconds on and whatever, 2 minutes off, and I'm going to lift weights. But I want X, Y, Z. Like you have to understand what input creates output.
Yes, exactly.
And how does it all work together? Like, hey, am I lifting weights for 2 hours, 6 days a week, but then I'm also doing 4 super hard conditioning sessions? Well, listen, unless, like what you said, is you're taking a 2-hour nap in between the day, you don't have much stress in your life, you don't have much to do, like maybe that'll work. But if not, like less could be more, or should we say the right thing is the right thing when it comes to that. And that's why, like, I feel like not only, I mean, coaches, this is a must. It's like, we just had FRC here, and I was like, that's one of the things people must, like, understand, like joint health. You got to understand it. Like, if you're a coach and not understanding, that's crazy. It's like, you must understand energy systems.
You,
right?
you have to understand the big picture, because, again, 99% of your people that you train, they want to live longer, they want to feel better, they want to be healthy, they want to, you know, performance is always important, but unless you're getting paid $1 million a year to perform, like, your health matters, for God's sakes. And some people, you know, are willing to sacrifice health for performance, but 99% of people you're going to work with aren't. Like, they want to be healthy, they want to, you know, have a level of fitness that allows them to continue to live well and to not fall apart as they age. And older people you're working with, the more important that becomes to them. So you have to understand conditioning. You have to understand energy systems. You can't just neglect that, or you can't just simplify it to the point of like, oh, we're just gonna do a bunch of sprints at the end of our workout and we've got our bases covered. Well, okay, well then just go do a couple sets of squats and see you've got strength figured out. I mean, it takes more than that, you know.
It's not. I mean, like I said, we talked about this 2 years ago, but and it's still here, where it's like the randomness of condition.
Oh, it's totally random for most people.
If you do random in strength training, most people kind of go like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Right? Like you're. But if you do random in conditioning,
unless you're doing CrossFit, right?
I know you're gonna throw it in there, baby. I know you're gonna throw it in there.
Not to bash on it, but you know, randomness, generally speaking, in any sort of training or life in general.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's happening.
You know?
Like, here's the thing, though. Like, it's happening. You know, we pull out CrossFit, and we think we both agree that, like, we know CrossFit's to do great work.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's more
I think the good CrossFit gyms out there now, they're not doing things at random. They have methods and
everything is
principles.
structured.
And there may be some variety in their exercises, but they understand the big picture of training, and it's not random. They actually have put some structure to it. And the better gyms out there, you know, they've taken maybe the principles or some of the exercises in CrossFit and figured out how to train intelligently and deliberately. I mean, look at James Fitzgerald, OPEX, and a lot of these guys have, you know, I've seen that have CrossFit gyms. Like, what they're doing is not really what CrossFit started as. They're doing an intelligently designed training program that's using the principles to try to achieve, you know, CrossFit competition or the, you know, the exercises that people use in CrossFit, but they're not doing things at random. They're doing things intelligently.
But there's also other gyms that are not CrossFit that are doing random dumb stuff.
Yeah,
like so that I think that's what it comes down to. That I think certain I would say sectors, whether it was like, you know, the rise of CrossFit, there was a lot of randomness going on.
Yep.
But now it's happening just in like high intensity group training.
Yeah, it's just because if you don't know any better, then what do you do?
Yeah,
exactly. I don't know, let's just try this, see what happens. I mean, that's literally, if you don't understand how energy systems work, you don't really get what conditioning is, you don't understand methodology behind it, then what are you left with? Like, let's just throw some shit at the wall and make it hard.
So that means, you know what, the thing is, so step one is like, you know better. Right? You know better, you do better.
Recognize the importance of it, I would say. If you recognize the importance of conditioning, then you should be driven to know better. If you don't think it's important, then you're like, oh, it doesn't really matter, I'll just do some stuff at the end. But you've got to recognize, like, no, it's actually really, really important if your goal is to actually help people. And once you recognize that, then your goal should be like, well, shit, it's really important, and I don't really understand it that well. I don't feel confident in my ability to write a program effectively, so I better fix that. Mm-hmm. And then that's where I think the path of...
for everybody, like for everybody that's listening, that's a coach specifically, you know, like if this is triggering you, good. Like you know, like I know in my life there was something that I learned and I was like, shit, I don't know enough about this, and this is really important. Like, I'm jumping on it because it's unethical. I mean, it's just kind of like one of those things. You don't assess a person, you know, they can't get overhead in overhead flexion, but now I'm having them do jerks and push presses and chin ups, and like that's unethical, especially if you know it, right?
Yep. But I think in my experience, you know, if you want to just lump people into two categories, because you kind of can, I would say you can take two people and one of them, you know, finds something they really suck at, and they're like, oh, I suck at that, I don't want to do that. And then the other person says, man, I suck at that, I've got to fix that, I've got to learn about that. It's pretty damn obvious who's going to be more successful. I don't care if you're talking about coaching or business or whatever. In the long run, like the person who's willing to say, I suck at something, therefore I need to not suck at something. I'll do whatever it takes to learn and get better so that I'm, at least it's not a weakness to me. Maybe it's not my greatest strength in the world, but at least it's not keeping me from being good at what I do. That's the person to be successful. You can look at any sport. MMA is a great example because you have so many fighters who are really good at one aspect of the game. Maybe they're great at wrestling, or they're great at striking, or whatever the case may be. If that's all they do, sooner or later someone exposes a weakness and they get knocked out, or they get tapped out, or they run into a wall. They can't make to the next level because they have such a big hole in their game. It's the same thing in coaching. If you recognize like, hey, conditioning is important, and B, I don't really know how to do it, you can either A, do nothing, or B, close that gap and figure it out, because that's the only way you're actually going to progress as a coach, which is the only way your people and athletes are going to progress towards their own goals. So, there's two people in the world. It's the one that says, I suck at this, I'm going to get better, or the one that says, screw that, I don't care. And
me personally, I believe the person that says, I don't care, you're going to be in a relic. In fact, but like 3, 4, 5 years, I'm telling you, you're going to be in a relic. If there's certain things that you don't know, it's moving to that direction where you're going to die. So you got to.
People can tell the difference at the end of the day. At least they will. The more people that take a more holistic approach and understand this, the more it's going to be difficult for you to compete with them. You're going to get crushed if you don't know how to do certain elements of fitness, and you're just going to look, like you said, you're going to look like an idiot because you don't know what you're doing, and half the stuff that you're doing, it'll be more obvious about who's an idiot and who's not. Yep.
And I wish we could have played that music from The Long Night, where everything is the hope is getting crushed. That would have been it. To end it off though, man, like where can people find out more about you? We're gonna push Joel to do more on IG, by the way. We have to, everybody has to follow Joel and then send him a DM to push more on IG. That's what we're trying to do. But where can people find more about you?
Yeah,
and about the search specifically, because
8weeksout.com, just number 8 weeks out. It's
8 weeks out.
My home for almost, I've had that site about 10, 11 years now. So there's just a big tab. It says certification, and that's essentially the big conditioning course we've been talking about, where we go through all the stuff, teach coaches how to implement programs, build programs, talk about methods and strategies, and give them templates and the whole 9 yards. So if you're a coach or trainer and you're just like, man, I recognize conditioning is important, I really don't know where to start, I've been doing random high intensity stuff, and maybe it's time to take my game next level, the certification is really the place to go. It's 18 hours plus material for myself, Mike Robertson, Bill Hartman.
And I was about to say,
because I've everybody in.
Because I've done it. So I do shit multiple times to get really good at it. So I've done it now, like honestly going through it for the third time. But Joel's improved every time. Like the cert keeps improving, by the way. Like it keeps improving.
I mean, that's the whole thing, right? I've always been the type that's like, man, I suck at something, I'm going to figure it out. Or hey, this is still lacking this, like I'm going to fix that. So this latest round, I kind of looked at through the cert and said, what can we really improve? And I realized there wasn't as much on, like soft tissue management and joint health as I'd like there to be. Mm-hmm. So I brought in Kabuki Strength and Chris Duffin to go through their methodology of how they treat it. And, Chris is a strong bastard, and he stays in the game and lifts monster weights and keeps training. There's a reason for that. So, I added Chris Duffin and the Kabuki team to add in soft tissue management and their approach to it and all that sort of stuff. So, it's always about finding things that need to be improved and figuring out the best way to improve them. So,
man, and I stay around this guy a lot. We hang out a lot, and like this is a dude that definitely is committed to that, and he is the protector of the realm of conditioning. Just so you don't get this shit twisted. There's nobody out there like that, all right? So go to 8weeksout.com. Honestly, like it's the best. When people ask, it's always hard to answer that question. Like, man, what are the things that I got to do? The certifications I got to do. Because I've done so many, and I feel everyone pretty much has a benefit, at least to some degree. But this is one of those where I'm like, it's gonna be in my top 3. I'm like, you got to do this. Have you done this? You haven't. Go do that shit now. And like I said, I stand behind it because it's done a ton for me. It's done a ton for my team, and everybody I've recommended it to. So make sure you get that. All right. Well, we'll get you back on the show. We're talking about
next time in helicopter, preferably.
Oh yeah.
Why are we in a helicopter right now? Is our question.
That that's an interesting question, and one I'd like for you to answer for.
Next time,
we're going to do a podcast inside of the helicopter, which is one of my favorite things to do. Joel, is like go up in the helicopter and talk about life. Right. With that said, love and appreciate you guys as always. Hey, we love a review, love sharing it. That's how the word spreads. So always thankful for that, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Video Life Podcast. Peace out.